So we have a coming together, listening, hearing, learning from one another. Because we are the power and the strength of transformative action. So to frame this out a little bit, we reached out to Judge Laurie White to have her involvement because, remember, I started the morning by saying there are a lot of different roles when we talk about reconciliation. In some instances, one might be the harmed, one might be the harmer. You might be a part of the community where the harm occurred and you don't have either of those other roles. And so part of why I wanted to have this opportunity to have a conversation with you is because you bring different roles to this process. Judge, at Tulane and Broad, for those of you who are not from New Orleans, when folks say I'm going to Tulane and Broad, you know that's the criminal courthouse. It is a courthouse dedicated to the criminal cases that are going on.
I like to call it Broad and the corner of Broad and, no, the corner of Tulane and Broad dysfunction. I'll get it right in a minute.
There we go. And so while Judge Laurie is a criminal court judge, she recently announced her retirement.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thank y'all.
Prior to becoming a judge, so here's what we know. There's works for her to do.
Thank you for some booze, too.
It's a different role. There we go. Yeah.
No, she's very expensive now.
There we go. Again. Look, again.
My community service is over.
So she was a criminal defense lawyer. She represented Isaac Napper, who you all have met. She represented Norris Henderson. I didn't know I'd get choked up about this. She, as a criminal defense lawyer, has worked for freedom. We can talk about justice, but to me that's a triggering word that has too many meanings.
Earl worked for me when he got out of prison.
That's right.
He joined my law firm. I did not Earl at some point. I don't remember. I've forgotten.
And so reconciliation, we have limits as criminal defense lawyers. We have limits as judges. People don't understand, and it's touched on, and we'll get to it, how the system itself interferes with reconciliation.
Right. Well, because it's considered to be the protection that people don't want to be involved and to talk about what's happened to them or to talk about victims' rights is a huge issue in all this great law in Louisiana for victims to have rights and for them to speak in court to talk about, what's occurred to them and how the defendant has affected them. But there's not any process for the defendant to speak to the victim unless it's at sentencing. And then once they're sentenced, and I tell defendants this now, when I have victims speak in court, that this may be your last opportunity to speak with this defendant who is going to say something to you after you've had this long, heartfelt victim statement. I did one this week, just this week, and Dave Capasso was there. And it was people that were dying to talk, but they were alive. But they were dying to talk because the other person in their family had been murdered. And the sentencing was going to have to be extended because the new defense lawyer got on and he needed to get the records to prepare a motion for new trial. And a motion for new trial has to be ruled upon by the judge before I can do sentencing. I have no choice at sentencing in this case other than to sentence this person to life without benefit of parole, probation, or suspension of sentence. So we know what the sentence is going to be, but they want to be there, which I'm like, okay, if you want to be here, why don't you just zoom in, instead of, because they're coming from Michigan. And this lady spoke and talked about, all the things that victims talk about, which I have to tell you, and you were just saying this about everybody getting up, moving around. As a judge, after 3 or 4 hours there's this judicial exhaustion. That a judge really shouldn't be on the bench more than about that. And in New Orleans, he really shouldn't be on the bench for more than about 2 hours, because I really need a Snickers bar, because not only do I become meaner, I think lawyers get dumber. And I think I'm right on everything, which of course I am. It's my courtroom. But, and I'm right till they tell me I'm wrong. So, exhaustion of just dealing and listening to the trauma really affects judges and law enforcement. And, when we started with body cam footage, and I now have to be at the scene to look at what the police officer saw, I have to listen to the 911 calls. The trauma of being involved with this is judges really need to be more, therapeutically sound, mature, legally smart, politically tough, and have a soft heart with all this. So it's a really tough way to put. It's hard to find those in politicians. So good luck with that.
One of the things that brought me to this work was watching. The process takes a long time. I was in a practice in a jurisdiction where a case might take 9 months to a year, which I think is short for Orleans Parish sometimes.
Not for me. I have a very low docket because my efficiency rate is graded, like everything else, by the Court Watch Group. And my docket is very low because I push lawyers extremely hard. Because I think that if a defendant is sitting in jail, that they ought to be moving quicker because they've accepted the charges. And now we've had COVID, and now nobody wants to work. And I'm talking about the lawyers, the prosecutors, the sheriff that won't bring inmates 1,000 yards over to my court or any court except 2 days a week. So the criminal justice system is more dysfunctional than when I got there.
So where does reconciliation fit in the midst of all of that?
I think it is the biggest thing going. I think it is what we have to do. I spoke with the district attorney about what I think he needs to do. Of course, I don't know that he'll listen to me. Maybe y'all can persuade him. I think he needs to mediate these criminal cases on the ones that won't settle. And when I say settle, not every case can go to trial, and most of them should not. And most of the time, it's a lawyer and another lawyer making a decision on what the outcome should be without having involvement from the victims. And the reason is the lawyers are changed so often by the defense, and actually the public defenders change less than the prosecutors. The prosecutors change so often that they don't ever develop a relationship with victims. I was a prosecutor in Harry Connick's office and also Doug Morrow's office in Baton Rouge. And then we would have cases from beginning to end. And I stayed with victims until the victims' mothers. I ended up at their victims' mothers' funerals because we stayed with them. And that continuity and consistency is comforting for victims, amazingly. They know the case. They're not going to cheat like they did in Isaac Knapper's case and many other cases that I had because they withheld evidence because they didn't take the time to be good enough lawyers to look at the damn file, to turn it over to the defense because they wanted to win so bad, they would withhold evidence. So, what was the question?
How does reconciliation fit in the midst of all that? How do you as a judge encourage that? How do criminal defense lawyers and prosecutors have a responsibility? And yet there's this structure that is forming and puts walls around everybody immediately.
The more I do it, have y'all heard from Charles Amos?
Yes.
So Charles came out of my court, and I made sure that the victim's father came to court with a wheelchair, and they met in my office, same place that Amy and Isaac met, and they had a reconciliation because I didn't know. My position is, what do the victims want? Because I sort of think we all need to go back to the Wild West, and I know you people won't like this, a lot of you, but if you I think you ought to exact the punishment that you want. But I know that's so barbaric. Don't you love that, Amy? No wonder I need a little therapy in retirement. So, but I think that when you actually ask most people, they're going to be in the forgiveness lane more than the let's stand at the okay corral and shoot it out. But I don't want you to have a gun. And that's what the death penalty is. So
what's the role of lawyers in that? Because we come in.
They should ask. I know. And I did death penalty defense work. Well, I actually did death penalty prosecution, and then I did death penalty defense work, and I thought, well, how hard could this be? I just have to learn everything about this defendant and then talk him into a life sentence. And I thought that was a loss, because I thought, well, wouldn't I want to fight it and be such a great lawyer that I win the case? And then my first client had like 8 bodies that he had killed, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm not sure we want to try this. I don't think I can ever win this. And the win is a life sentence. So when I acknowledged that, then let's start talking to the victims' families and see what they want, because most of them, the emotional upheaval of not understanding the criminal justice system and what's going to happen from an arraignment to motion hearing, nobody's explaining that. The victim advocates that even our new district attorney, Jason, they're very good about bringing people in. But I find that I have them show up on Zoom, and I have them put who they're a victim, because I want them to be able, I think that's the best thing Zoom has done for all of us. It allows victims not to have to go through a security check or the fear of running into other family members. They can be in my court and see what's going on, and it's less emotional for them. And they can see the defendant, they can see the lawyers, they can hear everybody. I think that's fantastic. I think that has helped, and I think it calms the nerves of a lot of people. And frankly, it keeps me safer, because then I'm not going to get shot when our bad security let a gun in, because so it really reduces some of those issues. So I haven't answered your question yet, but I'm trying. So I find that when I ask the victims, what do you want? What happened? Let's hear from you. Because see, when a victim is presented to me, I usually, and when I was a baby judge, even though I was still a 30-year lawyer, I didn't ask them questions. And I found after a case that's actually coming back for resentencing, I probably have some of the victims in here. The victims were asked questions by the prosecutor. I didn't ask questions, but they were never asked what they wanted the sentence to be. Everybody left it up to the judge, as in never saying anything. So I gave the guy the max, because I have a real punitive side, and I'm very proud of it. In some instances, I really think some people should be removed from society forever. And until a pardon board or a parole board has seen that they've changed their ways in prison and can actually live in a community where they are not still violent. That's what I believe. And so I gave this person a very long sentence, and then I had several victims send me letters that they were furious that I had done that. And I was like, well, you came to court and told me you had all these injuries and months of surgeries and permanent disabilities, so what was I supposed to think? And I realized then that it's my obligation, I believe, and I feel I have the authority as a judge to ask the questions, what would you like to see? And many times I've even had, when I want to turn a little so my husband can see my better side. So I've even asked victims in court as a judge, how do you feel about this sentence? And they're offering like 10 years or something, and one young man had been shot 15 times, and he was alive. And I thought, you were supposed to be the worst gun shooter I've ever seen in my life. How do you not kill somebody when you shoot them 15 times? And so I was dying to see the victim, because I thought maybe he's huge. I thought, how do you not kill somebody with 15 shots? And he was so unhappy about that. And when I heard from him, and I said, I want you to talk about it. They talked about it in court. His wife, the victim's wife, was more angry than he was, and I asked her if she wanted to speak, and she did. And it's just so amazing when an authority figure in a courtroom in this scenario actually has them talk, and they're just, it's like all the air comes out of them, and they end up crying and saying they forgive them and ask why. That's what everybody asks, and those are the questions that everybody wants to know. They cry and say, why did you do it? And many times victims express that they are afraid of that individual, because they think they were particularly set up for this crime, and that maybe this family member will be in the future. And I think that's what so many victims think. And many times the defendants will speak and say, well, really, my favorite one was this defendant that stood up and said, I'm not going to lie to y'all. Your brother that I killed was really a bad guy. And it was either going to be him or me, so I had to kill him, and I got the jump on him and killed him. I'm going to take my time, but he was a bad guy. And the entire family started going. And I was like, wow, now that was honest. And so he said, he was taking like 25 years and heading out. And he goes, Judge, don't hold it against me. And I'm like, you pled guilty. I'm not changing your sentence. So I was like, kudos to you, man. You're the first one that ever talked about the dude you killed as deserving it. I was like, that was a defense I would have maybe tried and never worked. So
when you were a criminal defense lawyer, how often did you get to talk to survivors and say, what do you want?
I did it in every death penalty case that I had. And it would obviously not be a survivor, it would be a survivor's family member. And I was stunned at how many people did not want someone to die for having killed their family member. I was really stunned by that because I'm not sure I would be so forgiving.
Do you see that in your courtroom, though? Do you see defense attorneys
No.
having that interaction, and why is that?
Because they're barely talking to their clients. And it's driving me crazy. The level of lawyering that I see from the prosecution and the defense is about to drive me crazy. And I can't take bad lawyering anymore and the injustice that is occurring. And I can only complain so much every day about bad everything. And it's very, very sad.
Can you talk a bit about...
She has a question.
Oh.
Lack of training. Oh, I don't think so.
And the question is, what do you mean by bad lawyering? What are you seeing? So the Zoom audience can...
I'm not ready. My client's in jail. I'm not showing up. I'm standing in for her, and nobody told me, and let me text them. And if they couldn't text, we couldn't practice law. And it's just, the lack of, a lot of this is post-COVID because the public defender's office has hired a lot of big brain kids coming out of different law schools all over the country, but they're invested in the wrong things with their client. It cracks me up that they will fight for me to set a bond on somebody that has a parole hold on them when they should be looking at the damn evidence to see what the issue is. And I'm like, what does it matter if I give him $1 bond or a $2 million bond? He's sitting in jail. Hurry up on the case. So it's like nobody can think through it. And I'm the judge. I'm not the one that's supposed to be telling everybody that. And I've become the judge eye roll. That's not right. But it's like common sense when you sit in my court. You learn these things. And they're lawyers, so they should be looking for keep your eye on what the important parts are.
The facts are the important parts.
Moving the case and getting your discovery. And I set discovery deadlines, which are immediately kick in, and now I have prosecutors that won't hit a button to send an email with discovery.
Discovery of the police reports, for those who don't.
So now the defendants are still sitting in jail, and I'm kicking the can every day. The lawyers come in and kick the can. It takes 2 weeks to get subpoenas out to police and to the victims and to everybody. Well, you can't reset a case. Judge, we'd like a quick turnaround. Well, it's 2 weeks, people. And what y'all don't realize is the clerk's office, the sheriff's office, my minute clerk, me, everybody has to move papers to make that happen. And so everybody is just dragging it. I don't understand why they're not filing speedy trial motions for the defendants. If you've charged me, you should have the case, the paperwork. You should have you should be getting it to the defense lawyers. The defense lawyers should be reading it. And I don't like mediocre to less. And I'm seeing too much of it.
So how did Charles Amos's case come to you?
It was my section of court.
It came back, though.
Yes, and I said I would not resentence until I heard from the victim's family, until they did a reconciliation. And that's what they did.
Who petitioned for resentencing though? What's
Oh, the
these?
state, I'm sure.
Okay.
I don't even think it was the defense lawyer. It was the defense lawyers that work for the state now. Because there's a bunch of those. That's the Emily Maw and that group that, they're the civil rights group that don't want to still call themselves prosecutors, God bless them. But they are assistant district attorneys that work in Jason's office, and they're looking at all these old cases and then bringing them back. And I said, I'm not moving these cases until you talk to victims and victims' families, and then I see their prison conduct. Because if they've been a bad actor in prison, then they're either mentally ill or something else is going on. They might just be a bad person that can't even get along in prison. Because you ought to at least be able to get along in prison, even if you're not supposed to be there. I know. Doesn't that sound terrible?
Yeah, David.
Sorry.
So many exciting things to say and questions for you, but first of all, what I saw on Thursday was a mother of a deceased murdered victim and the mother of
Handheld
the
microphone.
defendant, and you
Here.
put it all on the table in the courtroom, you let him speak, you throw it out, and you did it that way. Everybody in this room, if they saw that, would be like, this is exactly what we dream of.
I wish it had been filmed.
She forgave the man who killed her son right there in your court, and they hugged each other. And it was just, you see, you threw it out there, and sometimes...
Well, and believe me, the lawyers don't want to do it, but I sort of intimidate them into it. It's really, I'm the force, threaten, and intimidation portion. Because I mean, the defense lawyer was like, okay, we'll do it, and because what did he have to lose? His client's getting a life sentence.
It was actually negligent homicide, 1 to 5, not too bad, but I mean, yes, you could...
No, I got a second degree on that one. That's a second degree.
I thought they were coming down to...
So as they
Oh,
do
no.
that for the audience, there are different levels of murder with different types of sentences, and that's what
Yeah,
they're
this was a
talking about.
maximum life.
I thought there was another one with a guy who was run over by had a gun because he thought he was going to get run over by a boar, and then...
That was a different one.
But
Just another day in my life.
and there's a judge, Judge Ray Stein. You may know Ray Stein.
Of course.
He thought about being a priest, and then he became a lawyer.
Me too.
He does a thing on There you go. He did a thing on Fridays where the people come into his office, they have little donuts and coffee, and they sit around talking about the cases plainly and deals. I mean, in the next 3 months, not that I want to see you leave, but could we have a demand? Jason Williams was just here a couple hours ago.
I know.
Something where we can actually...
I asked him to I think he needs to mediate cases with perhaps a retired judge that is not telling them what to do, but a judge that might be trusted by the inmate population that would work with the prosecutors and the defense lawyers to mediate with the victims for all these Ramos cases. And the Ramos cases are the ones that were reversed because they did not have a unanimous verdict. I have 4 in my court, and I cannot get them to trial. It's just the prosecutors don't want to try them, the defense lawyers don't want to try them, and I don't want to try it necessarily because I've already heard the case, and a jury convicted them, but it was at 10-2. So the whole case has got to be retried. So, the air's out of the balloon or the bag or whatever you want to call it. So we need to have mediation on those.
The final question is that in your last 3 months, is there a mechanism where you could, and your crackerjack staff, look at the cases in your section that you feel are injustice and say, VA, I want you to call these, I want to look at it. Can you do that? I'm just thinking
I can do anything until I'm reported. The news media writes me up. And at this point, I'm a lame duck, so I'm pretty powerful. Please remove me.
I will help you. And don't forget, you got Dwight Jenkins. They called him 17 in Angola. He was in jail the longest juvenile, and this is the man who did it.
He
And
was.
there were times, and I'll say it, you were worried about the politics of the state of Louisiana, DOC, and Jason was like, why are you making me look like this? You don't want to be looking in the papers as soft on crime. You were ticked off about that. And that's
Oh, I'm
what
always
stopped.
ticked off about that because who puts the judge out front? The district attorney. The victims groups, because we don't get to say much. Everything I say from the bench. That's why I say a lot. And that's what you need to say. You need to give reasons. I give reasons for sentencing, either a long sentence or a short sentence. But you have to be able to put accountability that they've all looked at it. Because it shouldn't be, Why is that judge giving that person 5 years? Why is that judge giving them 99 years?
Don't you think part of that too is that the community does not understand any
Yes.
of what's going on?
That's why we need TVs in the courtroom.
Mm.
If there were TVs in the courtroom, all the bad judges would be unelected. The lawyers would dress better. They would be prepared. The cops would lose weight. And they would read the reports and look at their videos before they came to court. And I'm not even unplugged yet.
Judge White,
Here, I have
That's
two
right.
phones. I don't care.
Judge White.
Yes.
You described a system that, aside from poor lawyering, is broken.
Yes. I've been part of the problem. I managed to get myself
how-
elected and not make enough changes. You know how frustrating that is?
So how do we, as community members, I'm not an attorney, but I have gotten to know a lot about this system, and I too believe that it is very broken. How do we change it? How do we start
Do I have
to
another hour?
unplug all of the systems that we so deeply believe in?
I'll tell you the first way. Elect better judges. Give them money, a candidate that you want to run, so that it's not the same political groups. Do you know how much my husband and I spent to get my stupid butt elected? $300,000 of our personal money. And I had an opponent every time because I stood up against the district attorney, Leon Canizero, who I can't stand. And so I stood up against him, and he always put somebody in a race against me. Anytime I would give a low sentence, he would be on the front steps to call me Mrs. White. Gave a low sentence, and she should be removed. Mrs. White, not Judge White. So the political independence of your judges will give them the courage to be empathetic, because they're so afraid they're going to lose their job. I took a pay cut to come to work. Most judges do not. It is a large pay raise. And they want to be there until they get 100% retirement. And I don't know why anyone should be allowed to do that either. I started reentry, by the way. Did you know that? Yeah.
So explain to everybody what that means.
Do my water. I couldn't see it. All right, reentry. So because I had gotten Isaac and a whole lot of men out of prison, and a lot of women, and then my husband and I were their reentry program, and I basically coined reentry before it was cool, and then everybody started saying it. But reentry of what we were doing is my husband and I took the Isaac Nappers home with us. Give me a minute. When I cry, I look so scary. And I kept losing them back to prison. We couldn't keep them out because I couldn't get them a job for very long. So I said, when I went to be a judge, and I was getting to put people in jail, I said, well, there's got to be something on the other end. There's got to be better. So Arthur Hunter and he gave me the encouragement, and damn it, why I needed a man to give me encouragement except for my husband. But anyway, he got all that benefit anyway, whatever. So then I worked my butt off on it for years and got it passed and got it instituted. And the warden, Burl King, I may have a lot of bad things to say about him. He was amazing. I went to him in one meeting and pitched this story that I want your lifers in the prison to work with these young inmates coming in, and I want to hand select them because I want my gut to pick them, because I have good guts, and I can pick the people that I think want to get out of their neighborhood, out of their crime cycle, out of their poverty, out of their drug addiction cycle, out of their thrill for whatever. And let's see what we can do. And we then mentorshiped and trained these lifers, because I was very aware of the lifers. I had actually worked with them for years, training them to file legal pleadings. And so I knew so many of the men in the prison that I call them the old Republicans. And because they've been in prison so long, they've become just like Republicans. They're sort of like my husband. But he's not an ex-offender. He just didn't get caught. So they all become super straight-laced and just like they're afraid of these young kids even. And they are terrific parent and role models. And so we started this program at the prison at Angola, and it's still going on. But the good news and the bad news, when Jason Williams came into office, he then doesn't put anybody in jail for very long sentences, so nobody gets to go to reentry much anymore. So think about that. Is that good news or bad news? It's good news. But they're not getting the services that they were getting in prison. So we need to have the services and the guys that were in prison that were mentoring, working with them out here. And so that's the rest of it. Yeah. So I hope all judges lose their jobs because we don't need them. Just like reentry, you know?
Yep.
But I think it's a pretty safe bet. We're going to continue to have crime.
This is in reference to Dwight Jenkins, and it's going back to when I first was. Well, I've been introduced to reconciliation, but Laurie White did it without what we're doing today officially, with the victim and the accused in her chamber. And this was a really remarkable change in my brain when I witnessed this, because the guy said something, because the victim asked the question, why did you kill my son? So we all sitting on edges waiting for the response. And I didn't know the guy's case, and Laurie said, Earl, come here, this here. So we in the chamber, and the guy told the victim, Mom, Reverend, I didn't kill your son, but I lured him in that location where it happened. And she asked the judge, can I give him a hug?
And he was on his knees when he told her that.
And you know, this is the thing about what we're hearing about cases that not even brought here today, but Laurie White introduced me to it, and this would prompt me to keep continuing what I'm doing today. Even with the hardest cases that we got to confront, we know it's a hard digestive process, because when you think about it, you ain't letting nobody off the hook when you forgive them. You're really letting yourself off because you're holding, and you don't want to feel guilty as the person that committed, that violated, a case. And this is what we talking about here. And I just want to thank you for that opportunity.
You know what about that? Do you know the parole board let him out because I reduced his sentence, and now they won't let him see that lady. And I'm going to ask the parole board, when I'm not a lawyer, when I am not a judge, if the parole board will let him see her.
They did that with Mama Glow. That was one of the things that. So Mama Glow was the longest serving woman in Louisiana. Kathy mentioned her earlier. She was not allowed to have contact during her case with the victim, the survivors. It was family. There was a murder that took place. When she was sentenced, she was told no contact. You cannot have contact. So 50 years later, at the parole hearing where the children and grandchildren of the dead man came, and they said, we've never heard from her, and they're mad, and they're generations already.
They say that always.
Right.
We're mad that you've never reached out. You're not sorry because you didn't reach out.
And the parole board, and Mama Glow said, and this is a short version, what she said to him was, I wish I could have talked to you so you could understand I could take it all back. If I could turn back. And
it's amazing how the volume on that turns from super high to, it just turns the volume off on the whole thing. The emotions just completely change. And I think you change that with groups like this at the legislature. You have the statutes changed for if there is a signature when someone goes into prison that they wish to communicate, and that they should be able to talk. The victim should also be able to reach out and do the same thing, because you can reach out and say, please let me know if this person is going to be released. So why can't they let you know that you want to communicate, that
so
you want to know?
They freed her. And then they said, you're banned from Louisiana, and you were prohibited from having contact with the family.
You could ban people from Louisiana? What a great idea.
They did it. They did it.
I've got a whole list.
And so this healing, we see in that one case 2 generations that did not that are carrying hurt that is showing up as an angel. So I just lift that piece up. We've got some questions over here.
It's hot in here. Is this hot yoga? Am I having a hot flash? Am I the only one?
So I am new to this community, so I don't know much about you or the criminal justice system here. I'm learning.
You just don't believe everything you read.
But what I want to say is I'm fascinated by you because you're like this tough judge, but you're hilarious. And you and you do these great things, like what you did for Isaac. And I mean,
Right.
you do great things. So my question for you is, I'm getting the impression that in 3 months you're retiring.
Absolutely. February 6th,
So
79 days.
So my question is, on day 80, what are you doing next?
I have some adventures planned. And my husband is trying to keep his wife and his TV both working. So, but he doesn't want me to work much. And so that's my plan. So I'm either going to represent rich men or women that are charged that I really like for defense, and if I feel like it and have the time, or because I'm, no offense, all my poor indigent friends, not helping y'all again. Don't get another one because I love you and I'm still not helping you. So, and then I'm going to do maybe a reality show of this type of thing. But I can't talk about it.
I have a question. So you said earlier you have this belief that you think that there is a place for removal from society, but what if, I think we can also agree that this removal system, they're going to a place that is also very corrupt and enacts more trauma on them.
Sure,
So how do we
I agree.
reconcile that?
I'm not in the prison system, I'm in the Syndicum system. You got to work with that one. You see what I'm saying? I couldn't get enough done as one person. You've got to elect more of me.
In judges,
Yes.
legislators,
And
governors,
hold people
city
to
council
their
people.
jobs. Get TVs in court. You're going to be shocked. You're going to be saddened. Every day is traumatic for everyone in there. The tension when I said for them to do that was so palpable, and the fear by everyone, because I'm thinking, do I have enough security in here? I'm like, I don't know what I've just done. Just like I did it when I did it with you. I was like, this was so stupid. I had a gun in my purse, and I wasn't sure. I thought I was going to kill me just to get out of it, because I thought, who knows what I'm about to get. But you just have to sometimes step off on the ice.
I just brief analysis is that electing women judges I've seen over 25 years that are independent, that are open-minded, and has really changed compassion and other things like that. I've just seen it. One exception, I think, was Division E in Orleans Parish. I won't mention her name. And I hope that the administration does not appoint her to the U.S. Attorney. Is that out? Do you know anything about that? Okay. Last question is, can you just give us a little insight on your world with Mr. Barry Shank, and was O.J. guilty?
I had a case with Barry Shack. You know that. I had number 101 was the first DNA case in Louisiana. It was an exoneration out of East Baton Rouge. It was Gene Bibbins. And then we sued the Baton Rouge police and got $1 million. And Gene snorted up his entire part and went back to prison for drug. I'm sorry, Earl, you forgot how funny and awful I am. Yeah. He snorted every bit of it up. And the police were so angry at us, the defense lawyers, and I only got involved with Barry because I had been a prosecutor in East Baton Rouge, so I knew Doug Morrow, and they were not talking to Barry Shack. And I went to Doug and I said, what's the harm of doing a DNA test? Let's find out if this guy did it. Because I had a guy in New Orleans that I said, I'll do this, and we're going to spend your mother's money, but if it comes back that you did it, you can't spend your mother's money on any more lawyers because you're guilty. And they both agreed. It came back, it was him, and she said, let me go get him another lawyer. I said, it's not me. So they were so angry at Gene Bibbins in Baton Rouge that they went and tested another rape kit that someone had been living in the same house with him, and it came back to him. So then they prosecuted him for another rape. So they were trying to show that basically, see, he really was a rapist, but it was a girlfriend of his brother that he had been having sex with. So I negotiated a deal that the 15 years that he had spent in prison, we got credit for 10 of them on the other case, and then he was still out. So,
Thank you, Judge Laurie.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great to see you.
We gotta go big or go home. We're down to the gold. Never been a better time.